We are currently in an economic situation that is hurting almost everyone and everything in the United States, be it directly or indirectly. One of the few American institutions that has defiantly avoided the blows of the recession is the prison system. Massive amounts of money are being channeled to enforce laws, capture criminals, and incarcerate them. And incarcerate they most certainly are. The United States currently has the highest incarceration rate in the world, with the greatest number of people in prison. The United States has locked away some 738 people for every 100,000, while 61% of all countries in the world imprison less than 150 people per 100,000. These numbers are already imposing. What is more disturbing is that the number of people imprisoned in the United States is continually rising. During the 7 years between 2000 and 2007, the number of prisoners increased by 15%, while the general population of the United States increased by only 6.4%.
From the Justice Department, this other fact, looking at 2008, 1 in 131 Americans incarcerated in prison or jail. The number of inmates in state and federal prisons has increased nearly sevenfold. About 200,000 back in 1970, more than 1.5 million in 2008.
With this dramatic increase in the prison population in the past, we can project the number of people that will be incarcerated in coming years and estimate the cost of keeping them behind bars.
That if states' policies remain unchanged, they'll see an additional 192,000 new prisoners over the next 5 years. Now that's on top of about 1.5 million currently in prison today. So the total prison population of the country would be about 1.7 million by 2011. We projected that the cost of housing those 192,000 new prisoners would be up to $27.5 billion. That breaks down to up to $15 billion in operational costs, the day-to-day costs of running a prison facility, and up to $12.5 billion over 5 years in new construction costs. The country today, Rob, is spending about $60 billion on corrections. That's up from about $9 billion in 1982.
The cost is absolutely staggering, and as the prison population continues to rise, the cost will also have to increase.
We've also focused our criminal justice policies on building and filling prisons.
40% of all sentences imposed range between 5 and 15 years, meaning that prisons will fill up faster than they will empty out. On December 31st of the year 2000, the Department of Justice announced that state prisons were 15% above capacity and that federal prisons were 31% above capacity. States will have to build more prisons to accommodate the growing number of prisoners. This comes not only with a terrifying price tag, but with an additional disturbing cost. Every dollar that goes to the prison system is one that cannot be spent on something else.
And all of this money comes out of states' general funds, the same money that's paying for states' education, healthcare, transportation, roads and bridges. So when state leaders look at this corrections spending, they're looking at dollars that also are needed for these other critical areas.
Another unsettling fact about the money spent on building prisons is that it does not in any way go to solve the problems that are putting people in prison. One of the main reasons the number of people in prison is growing is because of drug-related crimes.
What we've been doing in the last 25 years increasingly is locking up lower-level drug offenders and property offenders, the whole massive approach of the war on drugs.
51.8% of all offenses that result in prison time are drug-related. In 2001, the Office of National Drug Control Policy requested of the Federal Bureau of Prisons an additional $420 million, and then yet another $316 million more in 2003 for the construction of drug-related prisons. This clearly demonstrates that drug offenders are ever increasingly putting a massive strain on the prison system, but none of them are receiving treatment for addiction, as the money that would go to such programs is going instead to building more prisons. According to the Justice Policy Institute, increased admissions to drug treatment programs are associated with reduced incarceration rates. States with a higher drug treatment admission rate than the national average send, on average, 100 fewer people to prison per 100,000 in the population than do states that have lower than average drug treatment admissions. Of the 20 states that admit the most people to treatment per 100,000 people, 19 had incarceration rates below the national average. Of the 20 states that admitted the fewest people to treatment per 100,000, 8 had incarceration rates above the national average. This happens because the recidivism rate for drug users is extremely high without drug treatment. Drug offenders do not uncommonly return to prison soon after their release. The underlying problem that must be addressed within the justice system is the legal status of drugs and the punishments doled out to drug offenders, as mandatory minimum sentences combined with the lack of treatment for drug addiction is steadily increasing the need for prisons by continually filling them to bursting, and thereby putting pressure on taxpayers. We must question whether or not it is necessary to keep incarcerating drug offenders the way we currently do.
What's the solution?
Well, I think it's multifaceted. Within the criminal justice system, we need to reassess the mandatory sentencing policies, the drug policies of the last 25 years.
We as taxpayers must be dubious of the way our money is being spent to confine these people, especially if it means our money cannot be spent on our youth. From 1987 to 1998, states' spending on corrections increased by 30%, while spending on higher education decreased by 18.2%. States spent $42.89 billion on corrections in 2005 alone. To compare, states only spent $24.69 billion on public assistance. Every dollar transferred to a prison community is a dollar that is not given to the home community of a prisoner, which is often among the country's most disadvantaged urban areas. A final point to consider before condemning the prison system in its entirety is whether or not it lowers crime rates. Over the past 25 years, the United States has built the largest prison system in the world. But despite a recent downturn in the crime rate, we remain far and away the most violent advanced industrial society on Earth. Now is the time to take a hard look at the prison system and sentencing policies, and decide how they can be changed for the greater good of our nation.